just so we can see who's here. We'd love to just learn what you do and see who's in the room. And we will start in a minute, but before that, let me just share some quick housekeeping items. I want to give you a heads up that we will pause the recording for about 10 to 15 minutes to have some open sharing space. We have some interactive parts built into this workshop, so just a heads up. We will send the slide deck and the recording, whatever portion of that we have, in a follow-up email. And I will drop an evaluation link in the chat towards the end of the session. Please complete it. It'll take you less than a minute, probably 45 seconds. It's 3 quick questions, and it really helps us design better and better trainings for you. And thank you for hitting record, Sharon. Welcome everybody to Who Holds the Mic? Storytelling Ethics in the Nonprofit World. I have been looking forward to this session, honestly, for months. We are so excited to bring this second training to you all with Further Together. We curate these nonprofit trainings with so much love and really a lot of, attention for what you need and what you tell us that you need. We do this in partnership with the Leach-Tag Foundation. Sharon Goodson is here on the call. You want to say hi to her. And yeah, I'll hand it over now to Maria and Esther to kick us off.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're so excited to be here. We love doing this session, so I hope that you enjoy it just as much as we do. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Okay, someone say out loud if you can see the screen. Okay, I see Sharon nodding, so I'm guessing that we can see the screen. Okay, so today's presentation is Who Holds the Microphone? Storytelling Ethics in the Nonprofit World. I'm Maria Rio. I'm one of the co-presenters today. My pronouns are she and her. And I am the CEO of Further Together. I have come into this work as someone who used a lot of nonprofit services myself. I came to Canada as a refugee when I was 9 years old. And, it was not easy. If you know anyone who's been a refugee, they usually have to use some kind of settlement service or anything like that. So I come to this work from lived experience, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. So that community-centric fundraising model is something that really speaks to me. And I'm just so happy to share what we've been working on, how you can apply it in your own work. I am joined with my colleague, Esther. Esther?
Hi, everyone. My name's Esther Sayan Lee. My pronouns are she, her. I'm so excited to do this presentation with you all. I really joined this sector because of the CCF movement and because I was aware that there were conversations being had about inequity in this sector. For me, I think the nonprofit sector is a microcosm of the best and the worst we have in humanity in a lot of ways. So for me, having this model and framework and being able to explore how we can do better to take care of each other, something that I'm very passionate about. I am on the CCF Global Council, really thinking about this movement and trying to advance and mobilize this knowledge to a global community. So it's been really exciting to do that for the past 2 years. I'm also part of the AFP chapter in Toronto, which had a recent reckoning with anti-Black racism and was on the verge of closing. And I'm on the interim board now to help guide it in a direction towards justice. So for me, fundraising is really just a means to mobilize resources in an ethical way. It's about making sure that we do in a way that honors everyone's power and autonomy always. So this presentation about ethical storytelling, about how we share people's stories for the pursuit of mobilizing resources, is something that I'm deeply passionate about. All right, so our goal today within the hour is to explore the ethics, transparency, and power dynamics in storytelling within nonprofits. Just the small things. So today, I'll give you a little bit of a guideline on this time. We really want this presentation to be interactive. So what we're going to work on is we're going to think about what do we look for when we're collecting and telling stories. We're going to have a group discussion about exploitative experiences in storytelling. We want to go through analyzing some examples in real time with everyone because we come to this work as let's explore and learn together. And we'll go into the conclusion and next steps. So before I begin, we've mentioned it already twice and it hasn't even really been 5 minutes. So I think it's good for us to explain, what do we mean when we say CCF? What is the community-centric fundraising movement? What is this framework? So CCF, or community-centric fundraising, or CCF, is a fundraising model that's grounded in equity and social justice. It was a movement that was created in Seattle by EDs of color, and it was a group of people coming together and saying, hey, we're in this sector. We see all these problematic things happening. We want to have a discussion about it. And from that, it catalyzed into a movement that has now become a global council and model. And so CCF, the movement, is prioritizing the community over individual organizations. It's about fostering a sense of belonging and interdependence, presenting our work not as individual successes, but holistically, and encouraging mutual support. And to us, it's really about imagining what philanthropy can look like, how we can imagine a new way forward. We want everyone to be able to participate in this work in a way that they are coming to it as equals. And we can only do that if we really address the systemic roots of philanthropy, how problematic it is. And we can think about how philanthropy, even when it's doing good work, can still perpetuate very harmful practices from colonialization, white supremacy, and just unbridled capitalism. So before we begin, we said ethical storytelling, we talk about exploitation. What is ethical storytelling? We should ground this. So according to the site on ethical storytelling, a key value of ethical storytelling is that as storytellers and nonprofit participants, we listen to the voice of the constituent as our teacher. So ethical storytelling means you're collecting the stories of people in a way that honors their power, dignity, and autonomy. Then the first step of ethical storytelling, and I would argue the first step of any work of equity, any work of equitable fundraising, anything about justice, the first question you really have to ask yourself is, how do we ensure that everyone feels powerful? But why does this matter? First of all, if you're in the room and you're obviously involved in fundraising or nonprofit, you know how much of our work really is just storytelling. We're telling the stories of our organizations. We're telling the story of our causes, our missions, the history of why it cares. All of us in this room are in some part storytellers. And ethical storytelling isn't just limited to donor communications and fundraising materials. It's also about the stories that we create about our own organizations and the work we do internally and externally. So when we talk about ethical storytelling, we're talking about authenticity, sharing stories that genuinely represent your organization's work, the communities you serve, the true impact of your programs, the internal, external challenges are you facing? Are you willing to have these open conversations? How is your annual report a complete departure from actually what's going on? There's so many ways that the stories we tell ourselves and our audiences shape our work. We're talking also about inclusivity. We're ensuring that the stories reflect the diversity of our community and make sure that service users are not being portrayed as less than, and that your organization or your donors are not being positioned as heroes. We're also always talking about consent. If we're talking about power, there's always has to be a discussion about consent. Are we obtaining informed consent from individuals whose stories are being shared? And ethical storytelling will never ever sensationalize or exploit someone's condition or their worst crisis point or their difficult time in order for emotional appeal.
So you might have seen in a previous slide, we had a picture that was in color and another one that was in black and white. And I'm pointing that out because we use this as an example of how you can tell a story in two very different ways. So let's say this organization both supports women who are, I don't know, immigrants or fleeing abuse or economic empowerment of women. Like, these images could both be used for that same organization, but which one are you going to choose to actually tell the story in a dignified manner? How are you going to center the dignity, autonomy, and power of that community member to make sure that they don't end up with a picture like this, with a story like this out about them. So things to look out for when we're collecting and telling stories: transparency, consent, and power dynamics. So do you recognize the power dynamics that are inherent to a storyteller and story collector kind of dynamic? Are you collecting the stories in a way that honors the person's dignity and autonomy? Are they giving you ongoing informed consent? Is this your interpretation or version of their story? And is it reinforcing stereotypes? Is it perpetuating white saviorism? Are you exploiting the vulnerability? So just giving you a lot of questions to think about when you are telling stories of your community members, or when you see storytelling be done. Like, are you reducing someone's entire life to this crisis moment? So let's talk about transparency and accountability. So these are obviously key to building trust with both internal and external audiences. So transparency and accountability are not just ethically important, but also contribute to the long-term success of your organization. It builds trust. It helps people feel like they have all the information that they need. So full disclosure is a big part of that. So for example, when we're talking about storytelling internally, a staff person may not understand the full financial situation of an organization and choose to continue working there. So you are taking that agency and power away from that staff person by not giving them the full story, the full disclosure. And it's a way to maintain power over them and their lives, right? So that's really important to kind of be transparent and accountable. Context matters. Always provide the necessary context to avoid misleading your audience. So for example, if a program has had mixed results, share both the successes and the challenges instead of using a misleading percentage. So if you say like a 300% increase and it's only like 3 people showed up the first time, like, is that really a successful program, or are you just kind of twisting the numbers so they sound a certain way? So are you eliminating some context? And then leadership accountability. So sorry, leadership. Leadership accountability is not just about answering to external stakeholders, but also being accountable to the staff and communities that you are involved in. So some questions to reflect on here are: how transparent are you with your team, with your donors, with a participant feel respected, dignified, and comfortable in how their stories are told? So is there an accountability back to the story sharer? Do you share the full cost of a program, inclusive of admin costs, salaries, benefits, operating costs? And are there accountability structures in place as a team and as an organization when you get it wrong? So you can see again, these color versus black and white pictures continue, right? So Esther and I don't really feel the black and white pictures are dignified, but the color ones are a lot easier to stomach. Okay, let's talk about power dynamics. So fundraisers have a lot of power. Nonprofits have a lot of power as well in how we represent people who access our services. So whether that's through one-on-one interactions with our donors, with how we talk about the work that we do in the media, how we tell the stories of people, like, it's just, there's a lot of power there that we really need to acknowledge and make sure that we're doing our best with. So a way to do that is to recognize implicit power. So the inherent power imbalance between the organizational leadership, your staff, your donors, and the community served. So just seeing how the hierarchy plays out and acknowledging it. Questioning the narrative. So who gets to tell the story? And why? Like, is it the organization? Is it the community members? Who tells the story? That actually will also tell you a lot about the power dynamics. Donor influence. So we all know that donor influence can have a large amount of power at our organization. So just be aware of how those preferences from donors can unduly influence your organization. So maybe sidelining community needs. And also money can also do that, right? So also think about how money can do that. Exploitative storytelling. So ensure the questions posed to community members allow them to share as little or as much as they would prefer. And we'll actually provide a guide for how you can do this with 10 different questions that allow the person to share as much or as little as they would like. So how did you come to the organization is a different question than like, what was it like not having food, right? So just really thinking about the reframing. Okay, consent. I think we all have kind of like at least a vague understanding of what consent means, which is good. But we have 3 things that we really believe make up consent. So it's informed, ongoing, and retractable. So having really clear guidelines on a clear consent policy is really, really important, right? So training your staff, making sure that they know what informed, ongoing, and retractable means on how to collect and tell ethical stories and how to make sure that you're maintaining the dignity and autonomy of the person. And then whenever possible, have community members review and approve how their stories are told before they are made public. So if you don't have direct access to a community member, let's say you support work abroad, right? Maybe it's not the best person to tell their story because you can't have informed, ongoing, or retractable consent in that situation, right? So informed consent. So make sure that they are giving explicit consent before sharing any individual stories. So this is very important, especially with vulnerable populations. Ongoing consent, recognize that consent is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. So if they agree to share their story at one point and like it happened to me, I had this whole video recorded, professional, blah, 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 and then the person retracted consent. Like that is their right to do so. So if it's not ongoing consent, then you shouldn't tell that story. And retractable consent. So creating a system where individuals can easily retract their consent if they change their mind about having their story shared. So maybe you used the story for 10 years, maybe that's not reflective of who they are anymore, and they just don't want you sharing that story anymore. So how can individuals actually retract their consent? So we're up to our first activity. You made it. So what we just talked about is kind of like the lens with what we want to approach the next 2 activities with. So the first one is exploitative experiences in storytelling. So we're going to invite you to unmute in a second to kind of create space and talk about how we have either been exploited through storytelling at organizations or, appeals or anything like that, or have exploited others in storytelling. So it's a very like reflective experience. I know many of you will have experiences off the top of your head to share, so we'd love to hear them. But just some grounding questions. So can you recall an experience when you were exploitative? Do you have a time where you felt exploited? And we'll ask for the recording to be paused now, if that's okay.
And for each of them, we want you to kind of reflect. We want you to reflect on the thoughts we had about ethical storytelling, about transparency, about accountability, about consent. But we also want you to look at them and go, when you finish seeing it, what's the emotion that emerges for you? And if you think about that, what was the emotion that you think the story was trying to evoke? And if in that case, is that the same one? Does that align? So we're gonna watch a video together, and we're gonna ask these questions together. The
Can you
sound,
hear it? Okay.
not yet.
Okay.
Oh,
No?
I think I heard it.
You can hear it
Yeah,
now?
we're good.
Okay, thanks.
Here we come. On a classic with British. Solid ammunition. I got this. Last one is on rebel position. You're going to stay.
Yeah, sorry, Maria. Can you pause it? Like it was making sound, but now I don't hear anything.
Do other people hear it or no?
Nope.
No.
Ah, weird. But you hear me. Weird.
Yes.
Hmm. Okay, let's see. Advanced sharing options. No. Can you throw it in the chat for someone else to share if it's okay?
Yeah.
And then you to Christina.
Actually, I got
Oh, you got it. Esther.
Okay, let's try this. Share sound.
There we go.
Happy birthday to you.
Make a wish.
Granny.
Hello.
Have you done your homework?
Ada.
For a general strike.
Ready or not? Here it comes.
Violent clashes with Britain.
Live ammunition against.
Deserve to get shot.
Have a nice day, Mum.
Airstrikes on rebel position.
We are going to stay.
Tabby.
Go.
Heavy fighting in Richmond.
Dad, where are we?
Rebel forces advance.
Daddy! Happy birthday to you. Make a wish, darling.
Okay, who wants to kick us off? So for each of these examples, what is ethical? What is effective fundraising wise but not ethical? And who or what is being represented?
So, just for some context, VAW means violence against women, so gender-based violence sector. Some important context before I let you all mull on it, but I do want you to tap into like what's the first emotion that comes up because this is supposed to be pretty visually impactful. Rates of gender-based violence or intimate partner violence tend to skyrocket around the holidays. There's a lot of reasoning for that. You're around family, people generally tend to stay like alone with their families. It's also a huge stressor. You're talking about lots of money being spent, lots of family around you, lots of pressures around the holidays. So there is context for it, but I did want to share that fact before you all mull over this.
So is this effective? Do we think it respects consent, transparency, accountability, power? How do we feel about this example?
Hi, I'm Marissa. My pronouns are she and her, and I don't really understand this one. So this is just like a hot take, but I don't know why it's Christmas and it's a cookie, a smashed cookie, and like a figurine. So it's not hitting me as initial perspective as a viewer, it's not hitting me as effective because I'm a little confused. And I don't know why there's a Mrs. Claus figure with a black eye. I mean, I know because it's violence against women, but in terms of the effectiveness of the images, I don't. It is not hitting me in an effective way. So I wonder if anybody else is feeling that and maybe can understand why. I'm not sure why yet.
I have something to share. So it took me a minute. I was looking at it and I didn't quite understand it first. But my take on it is that it can be anyone, right? That is a victim of abuse, even the most happy housewife or Mrs. Claus, that is like a figure that is supposed to be all happy and good things. But anyone really can be abused, and there is a front that happens that people put up because they don't want to share their stories, they don't want to be vulnerable, they don't want to accuse their abusers. So I think it's just like a way to create awareness that it can happen to anyone, and it's just a hidden story. So to me, it's effective. I also have a little bit more of a dark, I guess, take on things and art, but I think it's effective.
I think
Hello?
that, oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead, Courtney.
I think that it's actually effective. And I like the imagery of Mrs. Claus because it's like, if there's any woman in this kind of society that's going to represent like Christmas spirit and the Christmas experience, it would be Mrs. Claus. And so seeing that even this person that's supposed to represent that Christmas spirit as a woman could be harmed and hurt. I don't know about I hear what Mercer's saying with like maybe just the images, but I can imagine the images with music or even some statistics that it's like, okay, like this will help people kind of understand that like you can be making cookies, something that commonly happens for people that celebrate Christmas in this way, like making cookies, and like harm can happen. So I think that it does impact. I get it, and I think just with a little bit more like other stuff like stats and music, that this really slowly panning in or something like that, that it really hits home.
I'll go just as a victim of domestic abuse. And this kind of goes to the first question you had. When I was a child, there was a nonprofit that we like worked with that my dad helped us get like services at, and they wanted to take pictures of us when we were bruised. So seeing victims of domestic abuse, and even if it's, like this, people don't seem to, they want like the jarring images, but that doesn't seem to help. People know it's a problem. People ignore it's a problem when it's other people in their community. So I don't know if, it kind of just goes with kind of the gross parts of other ones that they do, like you're showing like black and white pictures of women beat up doesn't really get it there, just for me. But
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's repulsive behavior from that nonprofit, and they should close. I don't care. I'm just gonna say that out loud. I'm really sorry, we are at time. But what I want to say about this context, I think when we talk about abuse, there's so many types of abuse, but people, especially in VW sector, tend to hyperfixate on wanting physical abuse represented because that's the most shocking. And that's not the only way someone can abuse someone. And there's lots of survivors who experience several types of abuse that won't be shown. So that's something that I want to point out. But thank you all for your thoughts. I'll let Maria take it from here.
I also like what Jules said again in the comments. This campaign is Christian and Christmas centered. Oh, and what comments? And it depicts survivor as objects. Sorry, it just kept popping up. Okay, so we have loved being in community with you all today. This was a great session. You all came super ready with great questions. Thank you so much. We do have one more discussion here, but we are out of time. So we're going to leave this for you as homework. I'm going to throw it in the chat so you can watch it and kind of like think about, is this dignified? Who's telling the story? What is the story being told? And how is that working? But if you would like to get our copy of our 10 dignified storytelling questions, where you can leave open-ended questions for people to tell their own story in their own way, we have it right here. I also threw the link in the chat, so hopefully we'll see some of you continue this work, not only in these sessions, but in your nonprofit as well. And we'd love to hear a little bit more of how you apply the lessons here. But thank you again for being here with us.
Thank you, everybody. We'll share the recording and the slides as a follow-up. Thank you so much. Bye, all. Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
Maria and Esther.
Yeah, thank you guys for hosting this.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
you.